The clock in the stadium hit the 94th minute. In the sweltering heat of the arena, tens of thousands of Iranian fans held their breath, their voices reduced to a collective rhythmic prayer. This was more than a game, it was a decade of struggle, sanctions, and sporting isolation distilled into a single sequence of play. Then, it happened. A loose ball, a desperate scramble, and a thunderous strike that sent the ball rippling into the back of the Egyptian net. The world stopped. For 4 seconds, there was only the roar, a sound so primal it felt like the earth itself was cracking open. Iran had done it. They had secured their place in the knockout stages for the first time in history. Grown men collapsed in the stands, weeping into their flags. The Iranian bench emptied, a chaotic blur of white jerseys sprinting toward the corner flag in a state of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. It was the miracle they were promised. But high above the pitch, in a sterile, air-conditioned room filled with glowing monitors, the machine was already beginning to hum. The celebration was still deafening when the center referee raised a single hand, his finger pressed firmly against his earpiece. The roar died instantly. It was replaced by a cold, sickening silence that felt like a physical weight. Something was wrong. The screen on the stadium scoreboard flickered with 3 letters that have become the most hated acronym in modern sport: VAR. What followed wasn't a check for justice, it was a clinical, microscopic execution of a nation's dream. To understand the sheer magnitude of what happened in those next 3 minutes, we have to look at the timeline of the collapse. The match had been a grueling, tactical stalemate. Egypt, led by their talismanic stars, had played a disciplined, defensive game, while Iran had fought for every inch of grass. When the goal finally went in, the referee's initial reaction was to point to the center circle. The goal was given. The stadium was alive. But as the Egyptian players surrounded the official gesturing wildly, the VAR booth in the sky took over. At first, the commentators were baffled. They speculated about a potential handball in the build-up. They looked for a foul on the goalkeeper. But the cameras weren't looking at the contact. They were zooming in on a frame of video frozen in time, capturing a moment that the human eye is physically incapable of processing in real time. The officials weren't looking for a clear and obvious error, which was the original mandate of the technology. They were on a pixel hunting expedition. They spent nearly 3 minutes micro-analyzing the footage, drawing digital lines across the pitch with the precision of a surgical laser. They weren't looking at the play. They were looking for a reason to kill it. Finally, the decision came down. The goal was chalked off. The reason? An Iranian forward was deemed offside by the literal tip of his toe. A single millimeter of fabric, invisible to the naked eye, was enough to invalidate 94 minutes of heroic effort. It was a sporting robbery, executed with corporate efficiency. The fans in the stadium were blindsided. The players stood frozen, their faces transitioning from the highest peak of joy to the deepest valley of despair in a matter of seconds. It wasn't just a tactical decision, it was a psychological assassination. The technical justification FIFA used to defend this call is where the story turns from tragic to infuriating. Most casual fans understand the offside rule as staying behind the last defender. However, the official laws of the game, specifically Law 11, state that an attacker must not be closer to the goal line than the second-to-last opponent. In 99% of football matches, the goalkeeper is the last man, meaning the offside line is drawn from the final outfield defender. But in this chaotic sequence, the Egyptian goalkeeper had been caught in no man's land, having advanced far off his line to intercept a cross he completely missed. Because the keeper was out of position, the Egyptian defender standing on the goal line became the last opponent. This meant the offside line shifted to the next deepest Egyptian player, who was several yards up the pitch. By the absolute letter of the law, the Iranian attacker was technically ahead of that second-to-last man. But here is the problem. The Egyptian defense had utterly failed. Their goalkeeper was lost. Their line was broken. They were beaten by a superior tactical movement. Yet, despite being completely outplayed, Egypt was handed a massive get-out-of-jail-free card because a computer generated a pixelated line from an attacker's shoe. This is the weaponization of technology. FIFA has taken a rule designed to prevent cherry-picking, standing behind the defense to wait for a long ball, and turned it into a microscopic trap that penalizes players for having a slightly larger shoe size than their opponent. The spirit of the game was sacrificed on the altar of robotic accuracy. When you reduce a beautiful flowing sport down to a game of digital centimeters, the soul of the spectacle dies. This leads us to a much deeper, more disturbing reality about the current state of international football. We have to look at the financial and institutional power at play. For a nation like Iran, a World Cup knockout appearance is a transformative event. It brings in millions of dollars in FIFA prize money, boosts domestic infrastructure, and provides a rare moment of global prestige. For FIFA, however, the integrity of the technology is a product they are selling to broadcasters and sponsors. They have invested hundreds of millions into VAR and semi-automated offside systems. To admit that a call is too close to call would be to admit that their expensive machine is imperfect. So, they force a definitive answer where one doesn't naturally exist. They draw the line, they find the millimeter, and they justify the outcome, regardless of how much it violates the clear and obvious standard. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was exactly how the system was designed to work. The machine is not there to ensure the right team wins. It is there to ensure that every moment of the game is under total bureaucratic control. By removing human common sense from the equation, FIFA has created a world where a defender's terrible mistake is rewarded by a computer's technicality. The Egyptian defenders were caught ball watching. Their keeper made a reckless decision. In any era of football prior to 2018, that is a goal 100 times out of 100. But today, the machine acts as a safety net for elite teams and a barrier for underdogs. It creates a chilling precedent where the magic of a last-minute winner is replaced by a 3-minute waiting period in which the oxygen is slowly sucked out of the stadium. Think about the psychological impact on these athletes. These are men who have trained their entire lives for this specific 90-minute window. They poured their blood, sweat, and literal tears into the pitch. When that ball hit the net, they felt the weight of their nation lift. The emotional whiplash of having that moment ripped away by a group of men in a dark room miles away is enough to break any team's spirit. You could see it in the final minutes of the match. The Iranian players weren't playing with the same fire. How could they? They had already won the game, only to be told by a computer that their victory didn't count. The tactical momentum was gone. The belief was shattered. This is the hidden cost of VAR that FIFA refuses to acknowledge. It doesn't just change the score, it changes the DNA of the sport. Players are now terrified to celebrate. They score a goal and immediately look at the referee, waiting for permission to be happy. The raw, spontaneous joy that makes football the world's most popular sport is being systematically replaced by a corporate-approved delay. We are entering a dark era where the spectacle is no longer the game itself, but the tension of the review. FIFA is trading the soul of the sport for the appearance of perfection, but in doing so, they are making the game unwatchable for the very people who sustain it. The wider implications of this robotic officiating extend far beyond a single group stage match. It shifts the entire power dynamic of the tournament. Underdog teams like Iran rely on momentum, grit, and the occasional moment of brilliance to overcome the systemic advantages of wealthier footballing nations. When technology is used to penalize those moments of brilliance over microscopic technicalities, it effectively reinforces the status quo. It makes it harder for the miracle to happen. If a goal can be chalked off because of a toe, then the margin for error for an underdog becomes zero, while the margin for error for a larger team is expanded by the safety net of technical reviews. The internet's reaction was a testament to this global frustration. Fans from every corner of the globe, not just Iran, were screaming robbery. They weren't arguing that the rule wasn't followed. They were arguing that the rule itself, when applied this way, is an insult to the game. When a defender is standing on the goal line and the attacker is 5 yards away from him, common sense says that attacker is onside in terms of the spirit of the game. He has no unfair advantage. He is simply playing the ball where it lies. But FIFA doesn't care about common sense. They care about the letter of the law, a phrase they use as a shield to deflect criticism from their increasingly intrusive technology. This isn't justice. It's a technicality used to suppress the most exciting outcomes in sports. As the final whistle blew, the scoreboard read 1-1, a draw. On paper, it looks like a competitive match between two tactical sides. But the paper doesn't show the image of the Iranian players collapsed on the turf, staring at the sky in disbelief. It doesn't show the fans in the stands who spent their life savings to be there, only to watch a group of bureaucrats decide the outcome from a monitor. Iran was forced to walk away with a bitter, agonizing point, leaving them at the mercy of complex group stage mathematics that ultimately saw them exit the tournament. They did everything right. They played the perfect game. They scored the winning goal. Yet, they leave the stadium empty-handed because of a millimeter of fabric. This is the legacy of modern football under FIFA's current trajectory. We are losing the ability to trust our own eyes. We are losing the ability to celebrate in the moment. We are losing the beautiful part of the beautiful game. The Iranian dream wasn't ended by an Egyptian masterclass or a moment of defensive brilliance. It was ended by a pixel. It was ended by a machine that knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. As we look toward future World Cups, we have to ask ourselves, is this the version of football we want? A version where the most historic moments are decided by a digital ruler? Or do we want a game that allows for human error, human passion, and human miracles? The tragedy of the Iran versus Egypt match isn't just that a goal was disallowed. The tragedy is that we all saw it happen. We all knew it was wrong in our hearts, and yet the system is designed to tell us that our hearts don't matter as much as a computer-generated line. It was a cold, calculated end to a story that deserved a legendary finish. The stadium eventually went dark. The fans filed out in a daze of sorrow, and the lights in the VAR room were turned off. The bureaucrats went home, satisfied that the rules were upheld. But the game of football is poorer for it. The magic is fading, replaced by a flickering screen and a 3-minute wait. The image that remains is not the goal itself. It is the image of the Iranian captain standing alone in the center circle long after the fans had left. He wasn't looking at the referee. He wasn't looking at the opposing team. He was looking up at the big screen, as if waiting for it to change its mind. But the screen remained blank. The decision was final. The dream was over. FIFA had achieved its goal of absolute precision, but in the process, they had forgotten why we watched the game in the first place. It is a haunting reminder that in the modern era, a miracle can be erased with the click of a mouse. We are left with the cold reality of the standings and the lingering sense that the sport we love is being stolen from us, 1 millimeter at a time. The soul of the World Cup died a little bit that night in the desert.